is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. 1 year on, Italy locks down again as COVID-19 cases rise across much of Europe. Meanwhile, lockdown easing continues in the UK, but queues around the block at London's food banks show the continuing hardship. We talk to a Thai mother who lost her daughter in Thailand's 2010 protests and now fears for her son. Plus,
coronavirus isn't really a thing here. Like,
oh my God!
You know, like this is very lit here. I love it here.
School is here.
Could spring break be a super spreader? Warnings in the US as students head to Florida. For many countries across Europe, it's almost exactly a year since national lockdowns were imposed to try and stop the spread of coronavirus. Many nations are still suffering the financial and social effects of those lockdowns, while others are having to reimpose further restrictions to fight new variants of the virus. Rahul Pathak reports from Madrid.
A year on from these images, and Italy is set to go back into another national lockdown. This time last year, the country was the first in the world to impose a nationwide COVID-19 shutdown. 12 months later, the country is struggling to cope with a new wave of infections thought to be linked to the variant first discovered in the UK. The lockdown will see all non-essential businesses closed from April the 3rd to the 5th, the Easter weekend.
Last spring's events are still fresh in our minds, and we will do everything we can to prevent them from happening again. On the basis of scientific evidence, the government has today adopted restrictive measures that we have judged to be appropriate and proportionate.
Saturday also marked 1 year since Spain announced it would be going into a national lockdown. The country, like Italy, was one of the hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic, and the resulting lockdown saw its economy go into a self-imposed hibernation. Well, a year on, Spain's economy is still suffering the financial after effects of the pandemic, especially two of its biggest industries, tourism and hospitality. So much so that the Spanish government has approved a $13 billion relief package, with the aid expected to be distributed by the end of April. Meanwhile, in France, a sit-in protest at Paris's Odeon Theatre has gone into its 9th day. The protesters are demanding the reopening of cultural venues shut since last October due to the pandemic. Similar occupations are taking place in 9 cities across France.
This year was about what to do to survive, what to do to keep our heads above water. But finally, the fact of having to protest, that makes us feel alive. We're telling the government that they will not let us die gasping for air, along with our colleagues in the restaurant business, in our hotels or the tour guides. We are not going to be pushed aside.
Finally, in Germany, a novel way to cope with social distancing rules. If you can't hug a human, then hug a sheep. The idea is the brainchild of Lexa Voss, a personality development coach. She has been holding sheep cuddling seminars during the COVID-19 lockdown in the German town of Hattingen. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
A group of EU countries is calling for talks among its members about the distribution of vaccines within the 27-nation bloc. Austria, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Bulgaria and Latvia say vaccines are not being allocated on an equal basis. The Austrian Chancellor has accused some EU states of signing secret contracts with vaccine companies to receive more doses. In the UK, COVID infection rates are continuing to fall as the mass vaccination programme speeds up and lockdowns continue to ease. Well, Naweed Jabakil joins me live now. So, Naweed, the government's vaccine rollout is speeding up with reports of an ambitious new target.
Yeah, another major boost for the UK's rapid vaccine rollouts. Robin, a new study suggests that every adult here in the UK will be offered a vaccine 2 months before the European Union achieves that target. Research firm Affinity claims that every adult will be offered a first dose of the jab by June 10th. That's well ahead of the government's official target of the end of July. If you look at the rest of the European Union, as you just mentioned there are concerns about uneven distribution. There are also concerns about the lack of supply in some countries or to the bloc as a whole, as well as apprehension among some parts of the population in the EU to actually get a vaccine, which isn't on the same scale here. So I think the UK government, when it looks at this, back at that decision it made last year to avoid joining the EU's joint procurement scheme, it may feel it's been vindicated, particularly with these figures coming out showing the UK's world-leading vaccine programme. It's currently the third best in the world in terms of per capita figures. Another report suggesting the vaccine rollout could move even quicker. The Daily Telegraph reporting a government source claiming over 40s here in the UK, those aged over 40, will be offered a jab as soon as April 4th. Although a government spokesperson did deny that claim and said at the moment the official target is to have all over 50s done by April, and then the rest of the population, all of the adult population, to be given a first dose of the jab by July. Robin.
Well, let's talk about Wales now, which has started easing lockdown restrictions. What's now being allowed there?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you can see behind me, I'm in central London here, and lockdowns are beginning to ease as the vaccination rollouts ramps up across the UK. It means lockdowns are easing. Wales has taken a major step in relaxing its lockdown. Up to 4 people, as of today, Saturday, will be allowed to meet outdoors. That's from 2 different households. Outdoor sports will also be resuming, things like tennis or golf. Again, up to 4 people allowed to play outdoors from 2 households. It follows a similar move on Friday in Scotland, where 4 people were allowed to meet outdoors, really because different countries in the UK are taking their own, charting their own courses out of these lockdowns. Scotland and Wales did move into them quicker than England. That's why they've come out of them. The most populous country in the United Kingdom, England, its lockdown still currently in place. March 29th is the next big date here, where up to 6 people will be allowed to meet outdoors. Of course, the big caveat is if vaccinations, hospitalisations and deaths continue on the same trajectory.
Nuid, good to talk to you. Nuid Jabarkil there live in London. While the UK is slowly coming out of its winter lockdown, a year of layoffs and furloughs has left many people facing prolonged financial hardship. A report from the Food Foundation found food insecurity is at crisis level, with 9% of UK households affected over the last 6 months. A growing number of people now rely on food banks for their basic needs. Nicole Johnston visited one of London's busiest ones.
Standing in the cold on a grey London day, waiting for food. The line stretches for more than 5 blocks. 804 people joined this queue. Many arrive early in the morning, hours before the food bank opens. A growing tide of food insecurity has gripped this part of London, where many of its residents survive on low-paying, unstable work, or since the pandemic, have no work at all, like Janisha.
Pandemic because of jobs, first of all, and no proper jobs, and obviously no salary, so that was very difficult to survive. But this people has made a very useful thing by giving food for us.
Our live stream is supporting in excess of 800 families.
It's become such a spectacle that Taz Khan from the organisation London's Community Kitchen live streams the food bank every week. The first time he did it, it was viewed 1.7 million times.
We have seen something that we have not witnessed before. They're strapped, they've got no income, they've got no access to public funds, and they literally are left without any support.
Many people here are from the Indian Gujarat community and work in small shops, restaurants, factories and as cleaners. Some are paid as little as $27 a day by employers who are breaking the law.
This is the underhand or the invisible hand of the economy, and it's the elephant in the room. These people are exploited from this very high street that they're collecting food from.
Kajal and Payal have been forced to take jobs where they're underpaid just to survive. As foreign students here, they're not eligible to any government support.
For 15 hours I am doing job here, morning 8 to 12 at night, then they give 30 pounds because they say due to coronavirus we can't do it.
What's remarkable about this long line of people is that it just keeps growing every week. The food bank started by providing parcels for around 200. And now on Saturdays, up to 1,000 people are lining up for a spot in the socially distanced queue. 11-year-old Darmik told me he's collecting food for his parents and brother.
These operations are happening throughout the country. People are not talking about it because there's some stigma and people don't want to accept that their borough is living in food poverty or food insecurity. It's the conversation people don't wish to have.
But people are talking about scenes like this, the 5th largest economy in the world, where people queue for handouts of food. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, North London.
In the UK, a police officer has appeared in court charged with the murder of a British woman. Wayne Couzens was arrested on Tuesday after Sarah Everard disappeared when walking home in London earlier this month. The case has caused widespread concern in the country about women's safety. Everard's body was found in woodland in southeast England more than a week after she went missing. New York's 2 senators have joined growing calls for the US state's governor to resign after a 7th woman came forward with allegations of harassment. 6 other women have accused Andrew Cuomo of unwanted kissing and groping. Senators say the governor has lost the confidence of New Yorkers. Cuomo denies the allegations. The former president of Bolivia and several ex-ministers have been arrested. Prosecutors say Janine Áñez took part in a coup against the country's former leader Evo Morales in 2019. Morales resigned and fled Bolivia after allegations of electoral fraud. Áñez says she's the victim of a political vendetta. At least 6 more protesters were killed in Myanmar on Saturday, according to witnesses. 3 are reported to have died when police opened fire on a sit-in protest in Mandalay, Myanmar's 2nd biggest city. Another was killed in the central town of Pyi, while 2 others died from gunshot wounds at a protest in the commercial capital, Yangon. More than 70 people have been killed in Myanmar since a military takeover on February the 1st. A mother whose daughter was shot dead during anti-government demonstrations in Thailand in 2010 faces fresh turmoil after her son was arrested at a new protest against the Prime Minister and monarchy. Natapat Akahat could face up to 7 years in prison, and Martin Lowe has been speaking to his mother about the personal cost of political upheaval.
This woman is waiting to learn if she will lose her son to prison after he was arrested at an anti-government protest in Thailand. For her, it's a stark reminder of the country's long-standing political turmoil. Payao Akahat is the mother of a nurse who was shot dead during an army crackdown on previous demonstrations against Thai authorities in 2010. Kamon Kate Akahat, known as Nurse Kate, was treating the wounded at a Buddhist temple that had been declared a safe zone when shots fired from an elevated railway killed her and 5 others. This is the apron she was wearing that day, blooded from 5 bullets that entered her body. Despite a Thai inquest ruling that soldiers were responsible, no one has ever been charged. Now, 11 years later, the nurse's younger brother, Natapat, is facing charges of inciting unrest and illegal assembly by taking part in new anti-government protests in Bangkok. The first charge carries a penalty of up to 7 years in prison.
It feels like someone has stepped on my heart and crushed it.
During months of street demonstrations, protesters have been demanding political and monarchy reform. In 2010, activists also protested government powers. In a military offensive to end the turmoil, more than 90 people, including Nurse Kate, were killed and many more were injured.
Today our family is still waiting for justice for the death of my daughter. My son is dealing with injustice from the same group of people. This gives me the greatest grief.
I worry about my mother. She has lost her daughter, and if I go to jail, I care about how she will feel. But I have to be strong, whatever it takes.
Regardless of any political stance, this is a personal tragedy for Payao, who's already lost a daughter and now fears seeing her son receive a long prison sentence. It's a clear example of how a family's life can be shattered by divisions in society. At recent protests, Thai police have opened fire with rubber bullets, tear gas and water cannon. More than 200 demonstrators have been arrested. The Thai government says the demonstrations break anti-COVID regulations, and criticism of the king is unlawful. Martin Lowe, CGTN, Bangkok.
Still ahead here on The World Today. We'll speak to a three-time Paralympic medal winner about how Tokyo 2020 has disrupted her training and her retirement.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first two epicentres in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Health officials in the United States are warning that the spring break for college students could become a COVID super spreader event. Many young people have already flocked to Florida for the warm weather, despite the pandemic and the presence of several virus variants. Nitsa Soledad Perez reports from Miami.
This is the first weekend of spring break for college students headed to Florida. Partygoers started arriving, ready to hit the beaches.
Why did you come to Fort Lauderdale?
Because coronavirus isn't really a thing here. Like,
oh my God.
You know, like, this is very lit here. I love it here.
School is here.
Yeah, pretty much. We needed the release of Fort Lauderdale, you know?
I already tested positive for COVID, so I mean, obviously it takes time to get it again if you do get it.
Many universities across the nation canceled spring break to discourage college students from spreading the coronavirus. But judging from the crowds here, the students are in full force in Florida, pandemic or not. From these images, it would seem the U.S. is not in the middle of a pandemic. Florida has all three mutations of COVID-19, including the variant first discovered in South Africa.
The problem is when you drive, when you do things stupid, it affects only you, it's okay. But they take it home to them, to their loved ones, and they don't understand the effect their stupidity has on the second and third generation that came before them. Very stupid.
The state also continues to report more cases of the variant identified in the UK than any other state in the nation. Further south, the mayor of Miami Beach is keeping a curfew in place. He has a stern warning for the young people.
If you're coming here, you better abide by the rules. We're going to arrest you if you don't. I mean, the challenge right now is that the governor has opened up everything, and there's not a lot of other places as open, or they're just too cold, or both. So we do have tens of thousands of people coming here, cheap round-trip flights, discount rooms, and if they're coming here because they feel like they've been bottled up and they want to let loose, I think they should reconsider.
For the hospitality industry, keeping the state open has been a blessing.
I just feel like when you go out at night, everybody you meet is just Chicago, California, all of New York has moved down here. The Northeast has moved down here, period. Canada, forget it. I mean, Canada, you can't have people in your house and you're going to get fined. So people just come down here and they are just letting loose. And the numbers we're doing, let's just say, supersede the numbers that we were doing pre-COVID when we were open 12 to 5.
And Florida is not alone. Other states with popular beaches could become the source of new outbreaks, including Texas and Mississippi, where mask mandates have been lifted and governors are looking to open up their local economies. Health authorities keep asking Americans to refrain from traveling, but cases have decreased, and while many fear another wave, in Florida, locals are celebrating the comeback of tourism and jobs. Mitza Soledad Perez, CGTN, Miami.
The head of the International Olympic Committee says everyone will have to make sacrifices at this year's Games in Tokyo. Thomas Bach said he sympathised with the families and friends of athletes who want to attend, but that safety must come first. It comes after organisers denied press reports that the Games will be held without spectators. The Tokyo 2020 committee says it's planning to make that decision before the start of the Olympic torch relay on March the 25th. Steph Reed is a 5-time world record holder and Paralympian long jumper and sprinter. A medalist in Beijing, London and Rio, she's delayed her retirement in order to compete in Tokyo. And I'm pleased to say she joins me live now. Great to have you with us, Steph. So looking back to this time last year, you were still in training, of course, for those Summer Games, which at this stage were still going ahead. So how hard was it when they were cancelled?
I mean, on the one hand, you kind of knew that it was coming. It was a little bit of a relief just to have a bit of finality to it. And that way you can start rearranging and planning. But it was really tough. I think it also depends on where you are in your career. It's a very different experience if you're just starting out. Actually, perhaps the delay just gives you that extra year for development. But if you're on the other end and you're looking to retire, I mean, there were a lot of thoughts going through my head, just thinking, wow, okay, am I going to commit another year to this? Knowing in the back of my head there are just no guarantees anymore in terms of whether things are going to go ahead. And I had to make that decision that, you know what, I would rather try and be ready than risk watching it from home.
So you have decided to compete this year. How difficult has it been, both physically and mentally, for you and other athletes to keep going during this pandemic?
It's been really tough. I mean, it's been tough for everyone, regardless of, your job or your position. But in terms of athletes gearing up for the Games, it's hard because you have, this, you say a 4-year cycle, but actually it's been your entire life gearing up to this point. And you've got the possibility weighing in your head, one, that it might not go ahead, but two, it might go ahead and you may not be ready. You may not be in the shape that you want to be. And I think, you're also conscious that the position is different all around the world, and in many ways it's not going to be a level playing field depending on where you live and different restrictions. People have simply had different access to training and to coaches, and so you are dealing with all those factors. On top of that, there's a very weighing issue of money and sponsorship and not being able to make a living from what you're doing. So there are huge pressures for sure.
And you mentioned the uncertainty there about whether the Games will actually go ahead. How hard has that been to deal with?
It's always easier when you have a solid yes or a solid no. But I think what everyone's realizing is actually there's just never going to be as much. I think we've lived so long under this illusion of security and certainty, and actually real life just isn't like that. And this probably has highlighted that. And there are so many things in life where you commit to and you hope it's going to go well, but actually we have no idea. And so I think we're just learning how to live in different headspaces, how to adjust, how to be creative and make the best of what is a really, really difficult situation.
And one thing that's also still being decided is whether spectators will be permitted to attend the Games. How important do you think having fans there to support you and the other athletes is for those competing?
It really is huge. I mean, it is the crowds and it is the environment that separates out the Olympics and Paralympics from other events. And I think, you know, from what I've read in the media, it's looking pretty unlikely that international spectators are going to be there. And that's tough because I'm not the only one that has walked this journey. You know, my family has walked it with me. They've seen it from start to finish. You know, they're the ones that were there and saw the ugly moments in, you know, in the hospital after the accidents and learning how to run again. And these are the people that I desperately want there, you know, for the really great celebratory moments. So again, it will be tough. I mean, fingers crossed, we are at least going to have Japanese spectators there. But again, I'm just bracing myself. You know, I have to be ready for anything. And I have to remind myself that it's probably not going to be the same experience as any other games, but I still think it is going to be fantastic. And I would rather them go ahead looking a little bit different than not.
Okay, Paralympian Steph Reid, thank you very much indeed for joining us and wishing you all the best at the Games.
Thank you.
Mahjong is a central part of Hong Kong's traditional culture. But in an age of video games and smartphones, the familiar clacking of the tiles is heard less often these days. Fewer young people still play Mahjong regularly, and many local businesses connected to the Chinese strategy game have folded. But some players are trying to create a Mahjong revival, and they say the game is not up yet. Richard Kimber reports.
Jung Sung King has been running this Mahjong store for more than 50 years. He's a third-generation craftsman of the unique tiles used to play the game. But he says these days, business is tough.
There are so many different kinds of entertainment, so younger people rarely play Mahjong anymore. Since young people aren't playing these days and many older players have also retired, I feel the Mahjong industry is ultimately fading.
Master Jung says there used to be more than 10 Mahjong stores on his street, but he now only knows a handful of tile carvers across the whole city. Mahjong is a strategy game developed in China hundreds of years ago. It's since spread around the world. It's usually played with 4 people and requires a set of 144 tiles. A recent public survey found that only 1 in 50 young people are still playing the game of Mahjong regularly, and for those that are, many are opting instead of using 144 tiles for the convenience of playing on one of these instead. There are now hundreds of apps and online platforms for the game. While that's broadening its appeal, tile carvers like Master Chung are worried that it'll mean his trade is forgotten. Joyce Leung is hoping to change that. She's the co-founder of a group that promotes local traditions and tries to bridge the generation gap between Hong Kong's millennials and its master craftsmen.
People just buy the boxed Mahjong out there in the local retail shops, but then they do not know that there are still craftsmen in Hong Kong who know how to craft the Mahjong tiles.
She organises workshops for craftsmen like Master Chung to share their skills and runs an e-commerce platform to help them expand their businesses online.
The response has been great and the sessions have filled up quickly. Most of the participants are young people and have never seen this kind of thing before.
The group is now planning to offer virtual versions of its Mahjong masterclasses and do the same for other traditional local crafts, including wood carving and neon sign making. It hopes that'll help future generations to learn not only how games like Mahjong are played, but also how they are made. Richard Kimber for CGTN in Hong Kong.
Well, that's it for The World Today. Thanks very much for watching. We're available on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well, of course, as on CGTN.com and on the CGTN app. And from all the team here in London, goodbye.